let me begin with a little bit of my own story. I went to college in 1977, and I graduated in 81, and in 77, remember what I had said yesterday, is that there were only about maybe 6 or 7 women who were ordained and in seminary. So I'm at McAllister College, and we welcome a woman who's in seminary to come speak to us at our Hebrew House, which was the Jewish students organization. So she came to St. Paul, and she talked about what it meant to be in seminary, or at HUC, in rabbinical school. And I thought to myself, that's what I want to do. I had never known, I knew the first woman was ordained, but I had never met a female rabbi. I didn't really know that could happen. I didn't know I could do it. And this was in 1978, and she had this effect on me. Now, she ended up actually not being ordained by the seminary herself. She kind of went off into her own way and is a little renegade, a bit of a renegade. But what's interesting is that just her presence kicked off that idea that I want to do that. So what did I do? I was actually living in an apartment off campus. I went to my apartment, and I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, I figured out what I want to do. I was really struggling, as you'll see why they call it the sophomore slump in college, is because there's so many choices and you don't know what to make. And here I was like, yes, finally, I figured out what I wanted. I went home to my apartment. I called my home in St. Louis. My father picked up the phone. He was the first one to get the excitement. I said, Dad, I met a female rabbi. And his response was, you don't want to do that.
That's kind of what my dad said too.
And from that moment on, I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do. Because for me, it was so exciting. He heard in my voice what I didn't even say yet, right? I mean, I hadn't said I wanted to. I just said I met her. And he just said, no. At my ordination celebration, so let's fast forward 7 years, the seminary I go to is 5 years post-undergrad, but I took a year off for my husband to finish his master's at Tufts, so I went to Boston, then we went back to New York. So it took me 6 years to go through seminary.
Can I just say my seminary is only 3, so I'm impressed. That's a lot.
Yeah. The Jewish people, we suffer a lot, even through ordination. So so fast forward to my ordination. It's a big deal, ordination. It's in this grand synagogue called Temple Emmanuel in New York, and it is on 5th Avenue, and it was amazing and exciting. And at the party, my father gave me a toast. Now, this is a man who had 3 daughters, and always told us we had to support ourselves. Always told us you need a profession. He was a man ahead of his time in many ways, a cardiologist, but at my ordination, he lifted his glass and said, okay, Marcia, it's time to have children now. I'm like, what? What? What do you mean? I was just ordained. That's not the blessing you want to give to your daughter at that point. Now, if I had become a doctor, he would have had a different blessing. Good for you, go and be a doctor, because he was a doctor, and he understood what it meant to be a doctor. He didn't understand how I could have chosen something so vastly different than what he wanted or what he experienced. Medicine, science, that would have been fine. Religion, a whole nother story. So it was kind of an interesting journey in this way. I came to Temple Israel when I was ordained in 1988. I have stayed the entire 25 years here. That is not the normal process for most rabbis. And on top of that, I became the senior rabbi in 2001. So it's a kind of interesting journey that has happened. And women, so I was the first woman to be the senior rabbi of the congregation of our size. in the world, which is kind of says more about the community than it says about me, as far as I'm concerned.
Are you still the female rabbi of the largest?
Of the largest, I am.
Wow.
I am. Yeah. That is
good
true.
for you and too bad for Judaism.
Well, that's, yeah. I sit around the table with many men in many situations, even today. Yes?
So you said senior rabbis. How many are there in
How many rabbis?
How many rabbis I have? So there are 3 rabbis and 1 cantor. So there are 4 clergy. The cantor's the guy who sings really nicely. And I can't sing. Yes?
A senior rabbi, is that kind of like in relationship?
Yeah.
Is it kind of like a pastor?
It is. It's pretty much the same job description as in, I'm part of the downtown congregation, so Plymouth Church and St. Mark's and the Basilica. So all those senior ministers and rector of the Basilica, they all have pretty much the same job description as I do. I mean, with different language and a different religion, but pretty much the same.
Typically, the way it works
description.
in both of our religions is there's a senior pastor or a rector or a dean or something, and they report only to the board of trustees, whatever that is. In an Episcopal church, that's called the vestry, which is an old-fashioned English name, and they're kind of the board, and they hire us or evaluate us or fire us. I suppose if the board didn't like you, they could fire you. It doesn't have to be the whole congregation voting. And there's also no...
But to get into the senior rabbi position, the whole congregation has to vote.
They have to vote.
But to fire
Not
you,
for us.
only the board.
Not for us. It's all just...
It's like the CEO.
It's the
It's
CEO.
like the CEO. Yeah. Good. All right. So now I think
You got
that's.
another story?
That,
Do
you
you?
know, yeah. It's a really good question. Really good question. Do I get paid for being a rabbi? I better get paid because I wouldn't do the job. No, I'm joking. Yes, I get paid. I get paid a salary and also benefits. So I get health insurance and some other wonderful kinds of benefits from being a rabbi. What's so nice is that a rabbi, minister, priest opens so many doors. I've been invited to teach a class at McAllister College at St. Thomas, and I don't have a PhD, and I don't really have the credentials to be a professor, but I've been an adjunct professor in local colleges because of my title of rabbi. And so it really does open, and I think you all might have found this as well, so many doors of opportunities that have enriched my life. Being involved in politics, my husband's an elected official, so I'm very involved in politics. He's a state rep for Kenwood area. And so what's interesting, his name's Frank Hornstein, if you know. So what is interesting is that I have an into that political world anyway because of him, but even if I didn't, being asked to speak on the steps of the Capitol because I'm a rabbi, being asked to speak to issues in committees around school lunch because I'm a rabbi, I'm invited to do those kinds of things. So there are a vast number of things I do in a day just because I have that title. So it's a great
I will
opportunity.
say there are also some, I'm sure this happens to you, when you're a priest and you get invited to dinner at somebody's house, they always want you to say grace. Even if everybody in the family knows perfectly well how to say grace, they always want you as if somehow you know how to say it better. And I always do. I understand it's just a respect thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's silly, but it's a little funny. Also, when I ride on planes, I generally don't tell people I'm a priest. I tell them I'm a high school teacher, which is not a lie. But if you tell people that you're a priest, very often they'll be weirded out. And they'll start telling you why they haven't been to church lately. And I don't care. Or they'll tell you they're divorced and they're really, really sorry it didn't work out, and they promised in front of God and all their family, and they're really, really sorry, but it just didn't work out. It was the other person's fault, and they really have been meaning to go to church. They're going to start going to church. Or they start telling you how evil religion is and how hypocritical it is. And yeah, so sometimes if I get a funny vibe, they ask me, what do I teach? And I say ethics, which is true. But it's not quite the same as religion. What else was I going to say? Christian pastors, it depends. In most Protestant churches like Baptist or Lutheran, Episcopal, they're paid by their local church. But Catholic and Orthodox pastors are paid by the sort of centralized church, by like the diocese or whatever. And they're, in that sense, again, they're more of a worldwide or a national kind of an organization. Yeah.
Another difference is that we are ordained by the seminary,
Right.
and the Protestant tradition is to be ordained by the church that you're called to, the first church you're called to. So for example, when I had children, I decided to go part-time. And they called me a program director and didn't put rabbi. It was interesting. They didn't want to put rabbi in front of it because I wasn't acting as a rabbi, because I was doing programming instead. And I went and I said, I could wash the floors at McDonald's and I would still be a rabbi, because you didn't give me that title. I earned that title. So it was an interesting moment of sort of being clear that the congregation didn't have a part in that. They can hire, they can fire me. They get to do that, but they don't get to take away my my title.
And in the Episcopal Church, we're sort of half Catholic and half Protestant. So Rabbi is right. Protestants are ordained in their local church, by that church. Catholics are ordained by the bishop, who's kind of the boss of a big area, and sent to that church. I was ordained by the bishop in the chapel at Breck. So I didn't get to call myself Father Bellamy. And actually, Mr. Johnson was a student, and he took part in my ordination service. He was a senior that year. He took part in it. And so he got to watch me turn into a priest. Before that moment, I was Mr. Bellamy, and there was a poof. Yes, just like, and then I became Father Bellamy, and I became extremely holy and very wise. So it's different.